We're live. Phil and I are live. Bad news. Bad news for some of you. I know some of you are big Julia fans. Her car battery died today, and so Julia is on the way to getting a new car battery. So we have the incredible Phil Monahan behind the curtains today. Say hi, Phil.
I'm no Julia, and everybody knows that.
You are no Julia, but you know you're a good guy, Phil.
Thanks, Tom.
Phil just recommended a house painter to me. It's very helpful. Anyway, I miss Phil. Phil and I used to sit right next to each other in the office, and we had lots of fun. And now all we get to do is yell at each other across screens, so it's not as much fun as it used to be.
Tell them about the sausage, Tom.
Oh no, we don't want to go there. Well, I don't even know where the sausage is. Well, I could tell you a story while we're waiting for people to come in. One Christmas we got this sausage, one of these really tacky, I don't know, Hickory Farms, sausages or whatever, and in a food basket to the department. Nobody wanted it, and it sat there for a while, and we started placing it in people's briefcases and in their coat pockets and stuff like that. And sometimes it would sit in a drawer for 6 months before somebody found it. And it eventually kind of liquefied and turned like inside this moldy white. We were afraid to open it. We thought it would probably unleash a new pandemic in the world if the thing ever opened up. And we recently found it. This is like 5 years ago, wasn't it, Phil, that we first started the sausage? The sausage?
Oh, at least 5 years ago.
And when we cleaned up our offices when we went on the COVID change of office routine, and we found the sausage. And Phil, you had it last, but I haven't seen. I don't know where it is now.
I don't know. I hope it's been buried in a bunker somewhere so that it can never get out into the world.
Yeah. But anyways, it got passed around quite a few places in the office.
Look at where all your people are from, Tom.
All over the place. Poland, Sweden, wow. Finland, wow. We got an international audience today. Kentucky, that's a foreign country, isn't it? Sean Combs is from Kentucky. He seems like he's from another planet. Oh, Chile, muy bien. Anyway, looks like a great group here today, and we're going to tie a damselfly nymph. And damselflies are kind of the ace in the hole for some people. It's a insect that is very common in trout lakes, and it's a favorite food of trout in lakes. It's also a big favorite of largemouth and smallmouth bass and panfish, and carp eat them a lot. They're quite active. They're actually, damselfly nymphs are quite predaceous. They'll eat small fish and other insects, and they're quite active. They're active swimmers, and fish get hold of them pretty easily because they're swimming around a lot. They're not buried in the mud like dragonfly nymphs are. But what some people don't realize is that they're fairly common in trout streams, particularly trout streams that have some slow, weedy areas. A lot of tailwaters in those slow backwaters have a lot of damselfly nymphs, and they can be quite important. And it's a fun fly to fish because they're swimmers, and so you want to cast the fly out there and strip it back. Not really fast strips, but you do want to give it some movement because they are a swimming insect. They actually are jet propelled. They intake water and then squirt it out the back of their abdomen. So they're kind of jet propelled, and they squirt along and wiggle. And I think this action is fairly important. So we're going to tie one today that has a nice wiggly extended body, a nice free-flowing marabou extended body, and I think you'll enjoy it. It's a little bit it's a little bit different technique. I looked the pattern is called the living damsel, and I looked it up online, and it's been in the Orvis catalog for a long time. I'm not sure if it still is, but it was, and it was developed by a Czech fly fisher, fly tyer, and I can't remember his name. I don't know him or hadn't heard of him before, but developed by a Czech fly fisher. And the original was tied in a very difficult way. He would actually take a piece of marabou and split it in 3 different sections and hang 3 different pairs of hackle pliers on these 3 sections of marabou, and then twist them and braid them around, moving these 3 hackle pliers around and braiding the marabou into extended body. I didn't want to do that, and I didn't think you did. So I came up with another way of doing it that's quite a bit easier, tying it on a pin. And so I'll show you that way. I'm not going to take 3 hackle pliers out and braid a bunch of marabou, because it'll be a disaster. Worse than last week's muddler minnow, which actually went better than we thought. So anyway, that's what we're going to tie. We're going to tie the living damsel. And I saw a question about what season do you fish it for bass? Well, Mike, it's year round. It's always available because they hatch and they lay eggs, and then there's young damselflies in there. But the damsels get active as soon as the water temperatures hit about 50 degrees. So anytime when everything else, when the bait fish and the crayfish and things start getting active, the damselflies get active, and carp love them too. And I haven't used this particular pattern for carp, but I have used damselflies before for carp and done quite well, and for bass. So, but I would generally spring and summer season for bass. Okay, shall we start? What do you think, Phil? Should we start? Should we tie?
I think you should do it.
All right.
Good call.
I'm going to do it. Okay. So I am going to start by replacing my fly with a pin. And any old pin, needle pin, whatever. This is just a dressmaker's pin. Now I'm going to kind of angle my vise up a little bit and put the pin in there like so. I'm going to move this a little bit. So that's just a pin in a vise. And I have found that in order to slip this body off the pin, I put some tying wax on there. This helps the thread slip off the pin, and pretty good generous coat of fly tying wax. You could use anything that allows it to slip off the pin. You could use olive oil, power bait, anything that's kind of slippery. Olive oil might be fun, but just helps it slip off there. And then I'm going to start my thread about halfway down the needle and go all the way to right up to my vise, like so. Then let that hang for a minute. And then I'm going to take a nice fluffy marabou feather. And woolly bugger marabou works quite well for this. Woolly bugger marabou is generally kind of short and fluffy, and I think that works best with this. And you want to find a piece with kind of even tips. And you could use 1 or 2 pieces. I'm tying on a size 10 2x long hook. You could tie this on an 8 through a 14. So there's a nice piece of marabou. And I think it helps to just gently wet this. In general, when you're tying with marabou, wetting it helps keep things in line. And then I'm going to just this is going to be my tail right here. I'm just going to be a little bit of that stick out. And then I'm going to take about 3 or 4 turns right in front of the vise on the pin. And then I find that, and then I'm going to cut the marabou about equal with the head of the pin. And I find that throwing a whip finish on here, you could do with a hand whip finish. I have this extended reach whip finisher, which is a little bit longer because it's kind of hard to get back in there. Just like a 3-turn whip finish, it just helps lock that thread in place when I start ribbing that marabou. I'm just going to take 3 turns.
Hey, Tom?
Yeah.
Do you tie this in any colors other than olive?
I don't, but I think some damsels are kind of tannish too and brown, but olive is the most common, I think the most common color. And then a good idea here is to put a drop of head cement on those thread wraps. And you want to use something fairly thick, like high gloss head cement. You could use UV epoxy, I guess. And you don't want to use super glue because you don't want this to extend too far into the marabou. You don't want to use super glue because you're going to have to grab that point when you pull this off the pin. And super glue, you also may end up super gluing it to the pin because you're going to want to slip this off. So head cement, UV epoxy, something like that. And then then you want to just spiral the thread through that marabou. You kind of hold it with your right hand and use your left hand to wind over that marabou all the way up to the head of the pin. And at some point, you kind of have to stop and see where the head of that pin is. I got plenty of room to keep going there. And I think I'm almost there. Where's the head? Now I go maybe 1 more turn. Okay. And now you just whip finish right on top of that. You can trim this excess off if you want. You're going to bind that down on your body anyways. That's going to be tied under. And then just whip finish. 3 turns is plenty here. And then I find the best way to get that off of there is to grab it at the tail, but kind of put your fingers on the whole body and slip it off the needle. So what you're left with is this nice wiggly extended body. Now I can take my pin out and put my size 10 or 12 2x long hook in there. This is going to be the thorax part. So the wiggly part's going to be tied on the back, and that will wiggle. And the front of it will have the rest of the stuff. Straighten that hook in there. It's not too straight. Can't see from here. Okay. So now we're going to attach our thread and put some eyes on there. I don't think you want this fly too heavily weighted, because you don't want it to do a lot of bobbing and weaving. These things swim fairly straight, and you don't want it to jig like a Clouser minnow or something. You want it to swim fairly straight. So I think that bead chain is a good thing to add just a slight amount of weight to it, and then it gives you some good looking eyes. So I happen to have some black bead chain. If you don't have black bead chain, you can use silver gold and then just paint it with either some black UV cure epoxy or just nail polish or something. But the eyes on these damsel flies are generally black. So I've got 2 of them here. And I'm going to turn my hook upside down, unlike normal weight, because these eyes don't add a lot of weight, and the wing case is going to be tied on the other side. And I could tie this with the beads underneath the hook, and then I could tie everything else inverted. But you're not typically fishing these close to the bottom. You're fishing them in mid-water, so hook riding up is not really a big advantage here. I'm going to go back about, maybe 2 eye lengths or a little bit more, and cross over this way, cross over this way, and then keep going, building up some thread there, evening them out.
Hey, Tom, you're on the wrong camera.
Oh, so sorry. Let me do that again. So I'm crossing over, and building that up pretty good. And then I'm going to come around the base with some really tight turns. I'm using 3/0 thread here so that I can really put some pressure on these eyes. If you want, you could put a drop of head cement or super glue on there. But those eyes are going to be kind of braced by the rest of the fly. And if you put your thread, if you use enough thread tension and you tie that in properly, you don't have to have any glue on it. I'm going to flip it back up. And wind back to the tail. All the way to the bend. And I'm going to take my prepared body, and you want it a little bit longer than a shank length. So these things are pretty long and skinny. So I'm going to tie it in right about here. And this back end's going to be really durable, because that's really all one long piece of marabou with the tail sticking out. So, it looks flimsy, but it's actually quite durable, and that's going to kick around and wiggle in the water. Now, I'm surprised that nobody has asked me about tying this on a extended body with a shank, which you could do. But I think this way gives you even more flexibility and more wiggle than if you tied this on a shank. And then I'm going to, what am I going to do next? Oh yeah, I'm going to put the wing case on.
Hey, Tom.
Uh-huh.
Brad wants to know if this would work for steelhead.
I don't know. It probably would. I mean, almost anything will catch a steelhead if they're in the mood. Wouldn't be my first choice, but it might work. So now I'm gonna make a wing case out of some pheasant tail. And this is the good stuff in a pheasant tail that has the long brown fibers. So you don't want to use this because you're looking for this stuff in between here. So I usually come up to the top where whereas it's not as usable for things like pheasant tail nymphs, and grab my wing case from there. I'm just going to take about a hook gap width of pheasant tail fibers, just cut them off. So now I've got, you know, a bunch of pheasant tail fibers. And I'm going to tie them in so that that kind of greenish side is going to be up. There's the greenish side. I'm going to put that down now so that when I pull it over the top, it's going to show. And just wind it up to the eyes. And then this fly calls for a rib. Not so sure why, but I put a rib on it anyways. It adds a little sparkle. It calls for fine oval gold tinsel, which is kind of not used that much these days, but I use it quite a bit on some of my patterns. You could use gold wire, copper wire. You could use almost anything, but I'm gonna use a piece of oval gold tinsel. And I'm just going to tie that in on top and then kind of let it fall to the far side as I get back right up against that wing case. Make sure your wing case is on top. And then you're gonna pull this over the top, and I see a short fiber in there I'm gonna have to trim out later. Okay. And now I'm gonna take some olive dubbing. You can use any olive dubbing that you want. The first thing I grabbed out of my dubbing drawer was Senyo's laser dubbing. And it's a nice dubbing, and it has a nice olive color for this damsel. And it has just a little bit of a sparkle to it. So I'm going to just take a bunch of that. And I'm going to dub fairly thick thorax, starting a little bit thin and then getting a little thicker, because I didn't have quite as much tie down stuff up by the thorax. And I want this to have not too much taper, but I'm thinner here than I am back here. So I'm just going to add a little more dubbing as I go down. And then you just wind your dubbing. Whoops, caught the point of the hook. I do that all the time. And fill in that space from there to the eyes, like so. And then rib it with your oval gold tinsel. Four turns only, not 3, not 5, 4 turns. If you take any more turns than 4 or any fewer, the fly will not work. It must be 4 turns. And I can't find my scissors.
While you're looking, Tom, Chris wants to know, if there's any need to take a thread wrap under that tail to prevent fouling when it's wet, or is it stiff enough to not foul the hook
It
point?
doesn't seem to foul. I don't take a thread. It might be a good idea, but I don't. All right, and now you're going to put some legs on there, and the legs call for olive partridge. Not that you have to go out and find or dye a partridge hackle olive. You could use any kind of speckled feather, I think. And if you really wanted olive, you could color it with a marker if you don't have olive. I happen to have some olive partridge. And you probably want to grab a feather from the top because you want these legs to be relatively long. So you want to grab one of these feathers from the top that you don't normally use in a partridge cape, because you typically use the stuff down in here for your soft hackles and your nymphs and stuff. So you can use some of these feathers up toward the tail or off to the side that you wouldn't normally use. And I have two of them there. Now I got a feather for another fly. And then just strip the fuzz. Oops, at the base of that. That's okay. It broke off. And just come in with your scissors and snip the center out of this feather. Just come in with a point of your scissors and snip it so you have kind of a little V shape, like so. And then you lay those legs so that they're about the length of the body, right on top there, and just kind of gather them together and come over the top right behind the eyes. And that V that you made will cause the legs to split to either side, like so. Couple more turns to secure that. Trim it off. Then you take your wing case. You can find it all. And just kind of pull it over the top and flatten it, like so. And that'll kind of hold your legs down into the sides too. Take a couple turns there. Then lift it up and wind back over it just a couple turns. And now you're just going to add a little bit more of that olive dubbing. Put on more than you think you're going to need, because you're going to want to crisscross this around the beads. So put on maybe a longer, thinner amount of dubbing than you think you're going to need. That should be enough. And I like to take about 2 or 3 turns behind the eyes and then cross over, go around the eye, then cross under, and then look at it underneath to make sure that you can see I missed a spot there. So I'm going to, now it's covered better. Couple turns in front. And now all you need to do is fold that wing case over one more time. And I can see I got some short fibers in there that I need to cut off. And just fold that over the top to form your little head. Bind it down. And then give this a good bunch of turns to secure it so that it doesn't come out. That's the weakest point of this fly, or that when you tie that wing case down. And build up a little head and whip finish. Put a drop of head cement on it after you're done, and your damsel fly is complete. So there it is, the living damsel. And it has good action in the water, wiggles, has that nice damselfly shape to it, and just a little bit of weight with those bead chain eyes, small bead chain eyes. You could also use the very tiniest lead or metal eyes if you wanted to.
Are the bead chains enough to make it ride hook point up, Tom?
No, it won't ride hook point up because I tied them underneath. But as I said, I don't care if this, I don't need this to ride hook point up because I'm invariably going to be fishing this in open water around weeds. But you know, you're not fishing it close to the bottom. A lot of times you're fishing it as a swimming damsel. You could, if you wanted to, you could tie it so that it rides hook point up, but that would entail tying that wing case and all that other stuff upside down, and it's just I think it's more trouble than it's worth. But you could if you wanted to. If you really wanted to ride hook point up, you could certainly invert it and do it that way. But that probably won't ride hook point up. So that's it. Deadly fly, imitates something that a lot of game fish eat, and kind of fun to put together. Let's see if we have any questions here. When fishing this in ponds, cast to shore weeds and strip back to deeper water. Michael, I would experiment. I would cast it out there and strip it back to deep water. I'd strip it back to shallow water. The one thing you don't want to do is to move it too fast. In other words, you want to make short little strips because this bug isn't that big. It doesn't have that much jet propulsion in each little squeeze of its abdomen. So it's kind of going to go like this, you know, like this when it moves, not foot long move. So you want to use little strips, but you do want to keep it moving and then occasionally let it rest. And you can fish it at any depth, really. I think that probably in a pond, the best line for this would be an intermediate line, unless the water's real cold and the fish are deeper. But I think that the intermediate line does a good job of this.
Tom, it's worth noting that when they are hatching, these crawl out onto shoreline reeds and stuff to hatch. So when they're hatching, actually fishing from deeper water to shallower water is probably a better tactic because that's the way they're
migrating. And they actually spend most of their time in the shallows, in the weedy areas. You don't see them out over real big open water. And yeah, they do crawl out of the water, although the adults do get on the water, and when they lay their eggs, they dip on the water, and they do get on the water and windy days, and the adults can be deadly as well. I tied a Gibson's damsel fly, I think last year sometime. It's in the archives if you go into either the Orvis Facebook or into the playlist on YouTube. There is a playlist now on YouTube of all these tying sessions that we organized them all together. So if you're interested in the adult, then you can try that Gibson's damsel, which is a really cool pattern as well. All right. Any other questions? Yeah. I noticed that there's a comment there about looks like it would be a great, who said that? Oh, dry fly fisher 11. Looks like could be a great hex nymph. Yeah, I think that, it has the same general profile and shape as a hex nymph. And I think that if you tied this in tan, I agree. I think it would be a really good hex nymph as well. Hexagenia is a large mayfly that's a swimming, burrowing and swimming mayfly. So yeah, I think it would be a really good hex nymph as well. Really good point.
I just posted the link to the Gibson's damsel in the chat.
Oh, great. Thank you, Phil. Yeah, Chris. Yeah, the blue and teal damsels, and they're often green. Sometimes they're yellow. They're very bright colors. The nymphs are usually a lot duller in color. They're usually olive or tannish or brownish. They're not as brightly colored as the adults. And I don't know what color a nymph, a blue one, comes from, or what color a nymph, a yellow one, comes from. Leave that to the entomologists. But most of the, when I look in the weeds, or when I scoop up something from the bottom and I find damsels, they're usually kind of an olivey, off olive color. Any other questions? Did I miss anything?
Did you answer the one about floatant? Would you put floatant on it?
I wouldn't, because they don't hatch. They don't hatch in the water. So, I think with a nylon, oops, what happened there?
Your battery died. Or you overheated.
Oh, it did. But I gotta back up here. I forgot to put my backup battery in. Hang on.
Yeah, just like Julia. Her battery died too.
Oh, battery died. There we go. Okay.
How long is this going to take, Tom? Do I got a vamp?
No, it should go right back on. I normally have an extended battery, and I just forgot to attach it when I started. So my apologies for the snafu. What was the question?
Can you see that question from Peter?
Oh, floatant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then Peter, who is, go ahead.
No, I wouldn't. I'd fish it slightly subsurface or deeper.
Yeah. Peter from the UK says they'd typically fish a damsel down and across, which is generally frowned upon in chalk streams. How does this pattern perform if you're casting upstream?
With an occasional little twitch. I don't know if that will be allowed in the chalk streams, but
some of them you can't go subsurface at all.
If I were to fish it upstream in a chalk stream, I would let it dead drift, and then I'd give it a little twitch every once in a while when the riverkeeper wasn't looking. And then if nobody's around, I'd fish it across and down.
And Mark asks, how about fishing?
But I have been known to fish a woolly bugger in a chalk stream in the UK, so I'm probably not the one to ask.
Scofflaw. How about fished under an indicator on still water?
Yeah. You'd want to move it a little bit. You'd want to draw that indicator very slowly. Problem with fishing under an indicator is, to give it a little twitch, you're going to have to move that indicator, which might create a little more disturbance than you want. So if I were to fish this in still water, I would not use an indicator. I'd just fish it more like a small streamer with a very slow strip.
On a more general question, Diane is tying woolly buggers, and she wants to know, can you reuse cut marabou, or once you've cut it, do you have to throw what's left away?
I bet you could make one of these out of that cut marabou. Yeah. I bet you could. And you can reuse cut marabou for woolly buggers too if you got a really long feather. I mean, it's not going to have that natural taper, but I don't think the fish are going to care.
You can also save that cut marabou as dubbing.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it makes a nice dubbing. Makes a really nice dubbing.
Mike says he had trouble with the extended body for the Gibson's damsel. Could he use the pin technique for that extended body?
Yeah, I think you could. Not the way Doug ties it, and it's not the way I tied it, but it is difficult to tie those extended bodies. Um, I think you could use this technique, yeah, on a pin for that extended elk hair body or that deer hair body, yeah.
And Joe wants to know if when you were fishing this, you'd use fluorocarbon.
I might, or I might not. If I wanted to fly a little deeper, I'd fish fluorocarbon. If I was in real shallow water, I'd probably use nylon. I think 6 of one, half dozen of the other in this case.
Easton points out that he ties this in a jig form for deeper still water, and trout love it.
Interesting. Hmm.
And no, William, I never lived in Horton, Michigan.
Somebody asked you if you lived in Horton, Michigan?
Yes.
Must be your doppelganger. What is the deepest you've fished this in regards to a high elevation reservoir or lake with a prolific damselfly? Easton, I would try it at all levels. You know, maybe a full sinking line with a long leader. You don't know where the fish are going to be. You got to get it to the fish. If the fish are deep and you think they're eating damselflies, then you're going to have to use a full sinking line probably.
And if you want to do it quickly, you could put a real heavy fly in front of it and drop this off on a dropper. Yeah. So like a heavy tungsten jig up front, and then this fly off the back. That's what I was doing at Hubbard's Yellowstone Lodge last summer.
Mm-hmm. What is your line recommendation for fishing this fly in a pond? And I just use a standard floating line or an intermediate, because these things live in shallow water. They may go into deep water, but you know, they live in the weeds. That's where they prey on insects and little fish. And typically, when you get into very deep water, there aren't as many weeds and not as many damselflies, because most of their prey is going to be in shallow water. So I would use an intermediate or a floating line.
Tom, give a shout out to Bot, who's watching you from Kashmir, India. I'm not sure we've had that location before.
Wow. Cool. Yeah, I've heard that there are trout in Kashmir. That would be
everywhere the British went, there are trout, Tom.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting place to fish. Well, welcome, Bot. Welcome to the Monday fly tying. If Phil turns the heating on, could he get rid of the bobble hat? It reminds me of the first time I got fired out of a cannonball. First and last time, right?
Well, I'm going to need it come Saturday, because they're calling for 10 below Fahrenheit here on Saturday.
Oh, it's going to get cold again after tomorrow?
Colder.
Yeah, we're going to be very cold here in the east.
That's tomorrow. Fahrenheit for you folks overseas.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Doesn't look like it.
It's minus 23 in Celsius, Tom.
What's that? Minus 23
in Celsius.
Did you have to use a converter for that?
Of course I did.
Someday I'm going to be able to do that off the top of my head.
Google will always be faster.
I have a conversion app on my phone too. Why next Tuesday, not Monday? Monday's a holiday, William. It's Martin Luther King Day. So a lot of people have off. We have off. So we're going to be tying next Tuesday. What are we tying next Tuesday? We're tying...
Ooh, hold on, I'll tell you.
I forgot.
Next Tuesday, you are tying the Bank Beetle Dry.
Oh, yeah, the Bank Beetle Dry. Fairly easy fly. Good dry fly.
And Tom loves a beetle.
Yeah. Brian says it's his first class ever. Well, welcome, Brian. We're glad you're here. Who else is new today? Who else is?
Oh, there were quite a few. I noticed in the comments.
Great. Very cool. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, we will see you next Tuesday. I want to wish you all a great MLK Day, and hope you have it off, and hope you do something fun. We'll probably be sitting by the fire here, tying flies or reading or something exciting like that.
Ooh, Joe would like
Joe,
to send us pictures.
Yeah, Joe, just where's the best place to send it, Phil?
Post it as a message to the Facebook page.
Okay, a message to the Facebook page, Joe. William is watching from Iraq. I don't know if we've had any tires from Iraq here, but great to have you here, William. Don't forget your wine. It's not wine, it's cherry juice. All right, everyone. Looks like Phil had a phone call, and
I'm back.
I think we're out of questions.
I don't need an extended warranty, Tom. That was the phone call.
I got one too today. Can I sell you an extended
Thanks, everybody.
warranty? Thanks, everybody. And we really appreciate you coming in, and I hope some of you tied along. And if not, you can always watch this on the replay and tie your own living damsels. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next Tuesday.